I'm Sarah Wilson and you're listening to the Roots and All podcast. I'm here to help you get growing. Join me as I explore everything plant related both indoors and out and provide the information you need to create your perfect green environment. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. This week I'm speaking to scientist and science communicator Dr Anna Zakrisson about green roofs, particularly with regard to their use in urban areas and the important role they can play in water management. Amongst other things, we talk about the functions these roofs can perform, whether they can work in rural as well as urban situations, how self-sustaining we should expect the plants on green roofs to be, and if they're always the best solution. Anna begins by describing the work she does.
Well, so I'm a biologist really by trade, but we work very, very much with stormwater management on Green Roof. So basically, Green Roof Diagnostic is an independent testing research institute for green roofs. It's privately funded, but we chose that way to operate because it basically means that we are much more fast to respond to different things. I've worked in academic research for a very long time, and I'm very well aware of the long periods of time it takes between you having an idea and actually getting to test or really do that idea. So we have tested about 3 years now. We have long data series for different types of green roof profiles and also the different layers and the profiles. We've done retention testing and also detention testing. I think we did test 1,200 last week or something like that. And but it's amazingly fun work, and the team is really, really good. Our CEO, Brad Garner, as well, is just doing fantastic work, and it's just really super, super fun to really get some data out of these green roofs and to see, what works and what doesn't work and what could be improved and really be data driven in how we approach that. And we don't develop any products and stuff like that, so anyone could really send in things for us to test as well. So we have a lot of companies sending in their profiles or requests of testing certain things, and we do that and send the results over as well, and then we perform some of our own research as well that is meant for academic publication. We do a lot of hydrologic modeling with our PhD hydrologist Scott Jeffers, and work together with University of Sheffield to do some physical modeling of these systems as well, and have a PhD student there who works on this. So that's basically it. But I operate in Europe. Yeah.
I presume you test green roofs that could be applied anywhere in the world. So do you have to replicate the conditions of where these roofs would be situated?
Yeah, so for the detention testing, it's basically in a rain laboratory. So we test certain storm durations and certain storm intensities, and then we can measure the reduction in the peak outflow and the delay in peak outflow. And so that's basically how those tests are done. And then for the retention testing, we have outdoor platforms that are basically positioned on lysimeters that are weighed. Basically, we have some tipping buckets as well to make sure that they're really that the data we get out is really reliable. And we have new platforms now being built or I think they're actually ready to go online in Australia as well. And we're working on some in a few locations in Europe and possibly also Singapore now. So we'll see what's going on. But so for retention testing, of course, you need to make sure that it's the right climate and actually done outdoors to actually get some proper data for it.
Yeah.
The detention testing, it's more like physical in that sense, so that can be done in a rain laboratory.
And what is detention testing? I'm guessing retention is to do with retaining water, but what's detention?
Yeah. So retention is basically the water that disappears as vapor from the roof that never becomes runoff. So green roofs in general are really, really good at retaining water. So over the course of a year, they can perhaps retain 50 or even 60, or in some cases even more, of the annual precipitation volume. And that is fantastic because you're basically reducing the load on the sewage treatment plants, etc. For detention, that's basically dealing with the water that becomes runoff. So if a green roof is already soaked or it's already wet, it's a bit like a bath sponge that has been completely soaked and wet. It can basically no longer absorb any water. So one drop in, this basically becomes a pipeline. So one drop in is one drop out. And detention is about delaying that outflow so that, if you have a super intense storm, you have a massive runoff peak that can basically overload the sewage systems and cause ecological and economic damage and floods and stuff like that. So if you can delay that outflow, the peak outflow, basically, you can basically allow the sewage systems on your property, your area, to empty out before the water from the roof empties out. So that means basically that you don't have that flash flood into the sewers. So it's basically a stormwater management tool, a bit like similar to like a bioretention cell or a tank that basically fills up, and then you have a restricted orifice basically that lets it out at a reliable outflow rate. So basically you can control it that way.
And are you testing the quality of the water? Because I'm assuming once it's gone through the green roof system, you then have to check that it's not coming out, the water's not coming out with anything that you don't want it to come out with, contaminants or anything that might get into the drainage system.
Yeah, so nutrient testing is a bit my area of expertise. So this is the next step that we're building up now. We've done some nutrient testing and pollutant testing in the past, so this is something that we are working on right now as well on different systems because, as I said, it's really interesting to see what is going on. The literature as of now is a little bit. Some publications say that green roofs basically are not giving off that much, not leaking that much nutrients, and other papers say that they leak a little bit more. But in total, I think it's important to remember also that if you have precipitation that floods on roofs, it takes with them a lot of pollutants from a bare roof as well, and flushes down. And then you have 100% of the rain coming down at street level. If you have a green roof, at least 50% of the water over a year, or maybe even 60, will never actually even hit the street. So even if you might have a small increase in nutrient leakage compared to a bare roof, it might actually not be that serious because you have half of the volume coming down. So the load might not be that different. So these are the things that we look at as well, and to really get some good data and numbers. And but that's also very specific of what kind of soil media are you using. We have some indications of using certain materials in the green roof profile can also act as a little bit of a filter, so you don't get the suspended solids basically passing through and ending up on the street. So there are many different systems out there that appear to be quite good in at least capturing a lot of these pollutants. But then, of course, the goal is to make sure that the systems are developed even further. It's not like you can sit there and going, yeah, the systems are perfect. No, we should aim to make sure that they get better and better and better, and so that we can really green our cities in the future. And for that, we need data.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
And are you just testing in terms of water mitigation effects, or are you testing the other positive effects that green roofs can have?
So right now we are very much focusing on the hydrological aspects, retention and detention. That's basically been the sort of first phase of how we have built up the lab and what the capacities that we have to actually handle the data. It's been quite big. It's been a massive piece of work to model the system, and also to develop like new standards and look at the old standards, how the standards are defined in order to show if green roofs have retention and detention, if they actually work in real life scenarios, etc. So that's one thing that we look at, and we've been focused on very, very much. But there are other aspects as well, and that's, for example, energy aspects that could be very, very interesting to look at. And for that, we have some interesting things in the work as well with some partners that we hope to look into a little bit further. Because green roofs, if you have a city and it basically is just stone and asphalt, you have extreme temperature fluctuations in the city from night and day and such. You can also get these extreme heat island effects, the urban heat island effects. That basically means that the city is heating up immensely. You can have temperature differences of 50 degrees between like a really, really heated pavement and a green area. And adding back greenery into cities in the form of parks or even green roofs or green walls or whatever greenery you can add back, it basically cools the city due to the evapotranspiration, the water that basically the plants, the evaporation process basically from the green surfaces, but also the transpiration process of the plants that basically cools the city. So that is very, very interesting to look at that part of the energy aspect, but it's also interesting to look at the energy saving aspects. Can the green roofs actually buffer? Well, we know they can, but to what extent the green roof really buffer can you basically lower the costs for cooling of a house if you put on a green roof? Can that roof basically cool that much that you can get down the cooling? And we know that it can, but we would like to look more into these aspects of it to just get a little bit more data. But as I said, there has been a lot of research. I know the University of Ljubljana has done some really interesting research in collaboration with Urbanscape themselves regarding energy aspects. But so that's another thing that we would like to look into as well.
Obviously, in cities and suburban areas, you've got a lot of buildings. But I did wonder, are green roofs, or could they be, of benefit in rural areas too?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of. I think the first thing you need to really make sure to be clear about is, why do you want to build the green roof? There can be there are so many different types of green roofs on the market, and many of them have different strengths and weaknesses. So the first step is, do I want to have the green roof for stormwater control? Do I want to have the green roof because I want to, there's some requirements from the city? Do I do it for pure aesthetic purposes? I mean, this is an absolutely valid point, because just look at these roof gardens, for example. I mean, they can look amazing, or even these extensive green roofs with the sedums or other plants. I think they can look really, really amazing. So it really depends on why do you want to build a green roof. Now, if you're in a city and an urban area, stormwater management can be very, very costly. For example, in New York City, you have the big tanks underneath the houses. So if you can start managing a stormwater with a detention type green roof on top of the roof, basically, that means that you can reduce or completely remove the tanks underneath the building and use that to maybe build a fitness center or parking space. You know how expensive parking spaces are in New York City. It's crazy. So basically, this creates an ROI that pays for the roof in a very short time. Now, this is not the case maybe in a rural area, where you can maybe very inexpensively build a big bioretention or detention pond outside. So you might not have that return of investment in a rural area. So that is one aspect. So if you're building for stormwater management, of course you can do it for a green roof. You can build a green roof, of course, if you want to, but you might not have the same return on investment in a rural area. But if you want to do it for aesthetic purposes, or because you actually want to use the roof for something that is a nice garden or whatever, then of course It's a wonderful thing to also have in rural areas. But we should be very clear on where the return on investment is, and actually look at those things as well. Because it's not just a small hobby project maybe to build a green roof on a larger building. So I think it's very important to have that discussion with potential clients, etc., that they really have a good think about, why do I build it? What type of green roof would be the most optimal here? What profile is the most optimal for my climate? We've developed a few tools as well that you can use for that, to check out your local climate and see what's the difference between adding a little bit of mineral wool or removing a bit of soil or doing this and that, and then you can see the level of plant stress that will happen during the summer, for example. And then a bit like, okay, do I need to irrigate? Can I get out of irrigation, or things like that. But that's basically the main difference between rural and urban areas, as I see it.
Yeah, thinking about irrigation, how difficult is it to find plants that can cope with stormwater and still cope when there's periods of a drought? And I'm wondering if we don't find plants that can cope in these two extremes, then are we offsetting positive benefits by needing to irrigate during periods of drought and dryness?
That's a good question. So sedum plants, the ones that are well researched and used, we have retention data on those over, I think, 3 or 4 years now on these less emitter platforms. So we know very well how they respond. And when it comes to detention, it doesn't really matter what type of vegetation you put on there. You can theoretically also put stones on top of there, and the detention system will still work. But when it comes to retention and reducing the actual runoff over the course of a year, then of course it matters what kind of the transpiration rates the plants have, and et cetera, et cetera. So now most sedum roofs will not require any irrigation at all in Northern Europe or in Central. I know in Germany as well, they don't require any irrigation. They survive the summer. They can survive on very, very low levels of water. Now, this is also where we come back to where it's important to talk to clients why they want to build the roof. Now, if they want to build a roof for lead purposes, or maybe or if they want to have really high retention capacity of cooling a building or something, then of course you need the plants to be green and actually evapotranspire throughout the summer. So that means that even though the plants would survive without water, they would not cool the roof that much because they wouldn't really evapotranspire very high during the summer. So if you just want to have the roof for aesthetic purposes, I don't think you'd need irrigation. But if you really wanted to flourish and look good also in the hot weeks of summer, and also perform optimally with high evapotranspiration rate, it might be a good idea to put in like a drip irrigation system. But it doesn't. It's not necessary for the survival of the roof. That's what I'm trying to say. It just depends a little bit on what you want the roof to perform and how you want it to perform. That's basically the caveat that you need to understand before you build it, and be clear about.
You mentioned stones, actually, and I did wonder, are green roofs always the best solution?
A green roof might not always be the best solution. I think we need to be very, very clear because it depends on what problem or what wishes the client has. So now, and for that you need to look at the client's budget restrictions, and you need to look at why do they want to build a roof. So now, of course, if you want to have like proper stormwater management, a green roof with a detention capacity would be the best solution, because then you get both retention and detention. Now, if you put like some other material on the roof and just basically use a sort of a detention system underneath it, so you can slow down water, but you won't really you wouldn't really evaporate water in that way, because you won't have the transpiration effect. So you'll still have like 100% of the runoff coming off the roof, like a bare roof, just a little bit, like just in delayed outflow. So if you want like proper stormwater management, you will need that greenery as well. But what you can do with these detention systems is that you don't have to green. I mean, you can never green completely 100% of the roof. Often you have like at the edging, you have some stones, or you have like maybe you have equipment on the roof as well, where you can't like green underneath. But you can still have the detention systems underneath those areas. So the roof can be like 100% detention system, but then you have maybe 80% greenery or 70% greenery that basically has retention capacity. So that's how you can put it together. Or you can have a building with several different types of roofs, and you might have a roof on top, which is basically some equipment. Maybe you just have some rocks, some white rocks, or some cover there, and this runs up to another roof, which might be one of those detention roof system, like for example the non-proprietary concept called purple roof that has this kind of capacity. You can and they can also be installed on slightly sloped roofs. And then maybe this roof runs down on a blue-green roof, which is basically a nice lush garden that can basically store the water properly, like almost like a small. They can store like several centimeters of water basically underneath the green roof and use that for irrigation. So that's a blue-green type roof. But then you need to have a completely flat deck, and then this can run down on a kind of maybe a traditional type green roof, etc., etc. So you can have all these different systems in a chain as well, and mixing stones and mixing greens and different types of green roofs. So you can, in the end, create a kind of a nice system for the building that basically, with the aim that as little water as possible hits the street, and all the water is basically used to irrigate and cool and etc. So that's basically my sort of like utopic idea of how things can work. And for that, we need different types of green roof systems, and I'm happy that the market provides different types of systems that are suitable for these different aspects, basically.
Yeah, so you can slow the water, the movement of water down, but the plants really are quite key in terms of cooling effect. I wondered who is leading the way. Are there any countries that are really undertaking pioneering work in the world of green roofs?
I think there's good work done in many countries. I normally live in Germany, so the German green roof market has been going on for many years. But there are individuals, I think I would see, like really important souls in many different countries, and I'm meeting a company now on Thursday here in Sweden that are doing some interesting work here, and then there are some in Swedish you say like fire souls really work for certain topics. Like we have Dusty Gedge, for example, in the UK, who's working he's working relentlessly for biodiverse green roofs. And then we have Brad Garner and I think Oscar Warmerdam as well in the US that really come with novel and innovative ideas and are very data driven as well. So, but there are many companies. I think also the energy modeling of Urbanscape is quite together with the University of Ljubljana. That's something that I would like to mention as well as very interesting. And there's the tools that I need to actually mention are our own tools as well that I think are quite interesting for people to know of. They were developed for the Purple Roof website, so they can be found there. But that's basically you can go in there for free and just click on your climate and see toggle a little bit the different profiles and see basically how you can build the optimal green roof for your climate. And And then we also have a detention modeler but that's behind a login still. If anyone would be interested to take a look at it, then people can contact Green Roof Diagnostics as well to take a look at that. And that basically can model all these like chain reactions through a building, through different roofs, and then see what the end runoff would be, how much the system would retain and how much it will detain, and et cetera, et cetera. And then as our research progresses, we'll add different aspects. Hopefully we'll add like nutrient aspect to it, and et cetera, in the future. So we have large research projects ahead.
Yeah, definitely. And my last question is there anything exciting that you can see in the future of green roofs? What is the direction people are taking them in?
Well, I see a lot of exciting things. Something that makes me very, very happy is to see that there's more data coming in. Great research teams working on these topics. Elizabeth Staffman-Beck, for example, Virginia Stovin, and many more. I should maybe not start mentioning names because then I forget somebody. But there's some great research coming up and great development of new products. I'm really, really happy to see the diversity of the green roof industry as well, and I think that this diversity will basically mean that the more like variation we can get, and if we can have it really properly data-based and be very, very clear on what problems these particular roofs can solve for you and in which budget we would be if we install them, I think that would help green roofs in general to be there would basically be more green roofs built in general. And I am personally very convinced that like nature-based solutions like these are the key for basically creating livable and sustainable and resilient cities for the future. So I together with other ways to green cities, so creating clever park systems like they do in Holland, for example, where a lot of parks also act as rain gardens and etc. And they have fantastic landscape architects. I think there's one in Edinburgh as well, some fantastic rain garden that was created there that I've seen pictures of. But I think this greening of our urban environment is just so important for humanity over the years to come, and in any ways we can achieve that, that is something that I would be very, very happy to work with and support. So happen to work with the green roofs, and I'm happy to do that.
There are lots of instances in horticulture where gardeners and designers base decisions on outdated information or on good old instinct because the data isn't available upon which to make good judgments. So the work done by people like Anna is super important if we want to proceed in the most informed way. Thank you to Anna for taking part in the interview, and thanks to you for listening and learning along with me. I'll leave you with Dr Ian Bedford talking about a bug with a taste for onions.
Since first being detected in Britain during 2002, the Allium leaf miner fly has become a major problem for allium growers throughout most of England and Wales. Onions, chives, leeks, garlic and shallots are all at risk from this serious pest. And once infested with its maggoty larvae, there's nothing that can be done to control it. The problem starts when the adult flies land on the alliums during early spring and begin puncturing the leaves to feed on the sap. They then start to lay their eggs within the puncture holes, which soon hatch into tiny white maggots. The maggots begin tunnelling within the leaves, feeding on the cells and creating mines that allow fungal and bacterial rots to set in. Before long, the allium is wilting and starts to die. By this time, the maggots have reached maturity and will turn into pupae either within the allium stem or the surrounding soil. From these, the second generation adults hatch during mid to late autumn and repeat the egg-laying cycle. The resulting pupae then overwinter and hatch the following spring. Since there's nothing that can be done to control the maggots, other than destroying the infested plant, it's important to make sure the adult flies can't lay their eggs on the alliums in the first place. So alliums should therefore be planted in a location where mining flies have not previously occurred and should be grown under a fine mesh netting or horticultural fleece.
You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website www.rootsandall.co.uk, where you'll also find my blog and a sign-up form for the newsletter, which gives you a weekly roundup of content, plus the inside scoop on things like upcoming guests. Or you can subscribe wherever you normally get your podcasts. Email me with comments and feedback at podcast@rootsandall.co.uk. Follow me on Twitter, Roots and All, Facebook, Roots and All UK, and Instagram, Roots and All Pod. But please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support my work, because if you like what I do, please help me to continue doing it. Even if you make a one-off donation of £1, trust me, it all helps and I will be immensely grateful. So please go to Patreon and search for Roots and All.